speaker this morning, Brad Evans. I think you need to sit down this morning because we're going to be here for a while. Thank you. We need silence. Now, we are very honored to have our speaker this morning. He is Mr. Ulrich Peterson. He is a crime prevention specialist and the managing director of TVX services. He has been doing trauma counseling for rape victims for over 25 years. In other words, he is very experienced in this field. With the knowledge that he has gained from his counseling of rape victims, he has developed a dynamic training course specifically aimed at crime prevention, but specializing in rape prevention. It is said that his courses are very entertaining, so I think we can look forward to an hour of that is going to be very informative but also entertaining. The aim of his courses is not to create trauma and fear, but rather the opposite, to give us confidence in situations that we might have to face. These courses that he offers are recognized internationally, and in 2004 he won an international award for his groundbreaking courses of his. Mr. Peterson, we are honored to have you here this morning, and I'm sure the girls can't wait to hear the practice. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning. It's an absolute honor for me to spend about 45 minutes to an hour with you. And so many of you might be going, well, what are we in for this morning? So, if I had one objective, and that was so that when you leave here today, all of you would be able to protect yourself or defend yourself against a much stronger man. Would that be good for you?
Yes.
To be able to take him out like that? Yes. Would that be good? Yes. Don't start thinking, oh, I'm going to beat up my brother when I get home. This is just for self-defense. But just to start off with, I want to give you a bit of background on myself. Throughout my schooling, I was committed or very dedicated to martial arts. Karate in specific. I don't know if any of you know anything about karate. Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, all those guys. So when I was young, that's who I wanted to be. And I spent a lot of time training. And by the time I was about 12 years old, I was the youngest black belt in South Africa, if black belt means anything to you. Throughout my schooling, I dedicated a lot of time to karate, and by the time I finished school, I was a South African and a world champion, and I decided that my career would be that of a karate instructor. And very soon I had a big karate center with lots of little kids running around, and I started having a lot of the moms come to me and say something along the lines of, can you teach us to beat up our husbands? Wow, we've got a lot of sadistic women around. But I realized they just wanted to learn to defend themselves. So I developed a ladies' self-defense course. And very soon I had a big group of women kicking and punching and screaming and shouting and becoming extremely aggressive. And I thought I was doing a phenomenal job, especially when I started having some of the husbands now phoning me and saying, oh, can you teach us to defend ourselves against our wives? So I really did think I was doing a great job. Until the one day, one of the ladies came to me and she said, you know, this karate stuff is rubbish, it's never going to work. And I said, well, why do you say that? I mean, I'm a pro, I know what I'm doing. And after chatting to her for a while, she actually admitted to me that she'd been raped. And she said the guy was just too strong and aggressive, and she didn't think that trying any of these techniques that I was teaching her would actually have worked at all. In fact, she felt that if she had tried anything, it might have made things worse. And I realized that I actually didn't know much about rape, or what happens during the rape. And maybe I was giving women a lot of false hopes by teaching them all these fancy moves that I was teaching. So I decided to put a stop to the training courses, but I still felt that there was a great need for women to learn to defend themselves. And I thought, well, let me do some research on rape. And the way that I did the research was approaching organizations like the Rape Crisis Center. Now, many of the women working at Rape Crisis had been through some kind of an incident, had received counseling, and felt that they wanted to maybe help other women in the same situation. And they were quite happy to assist me with this research. And I thought, if I could interview them and get an idea of exactly what happens, maybe they could assist me in developing some kind of a training course that would work. And it was extremely successful. Because some woman said to me, I've tried this and it didn't work, or I tried that and it didn't work, and we left it out of the training. But here and there was a woman who said, I tried this and it worked. And I thought, well, let's bring that into the training. So bit by bit, we started developing what I called a rape prevention course, not a self-defense course. And it actually, a lot of it didn't have too much to do with martial arts at all. And what I did find, however, during this period is that many of these women actually hadn't got over the attack. Quite often during these interviews, they'd break down and start crying, and I'd try and give them some comfort and advice. And quite often afterwards, they'd say to me, I feel so much better after speaking to you. Obviously, you're a counselor. And I went, no, I'm a karate teacher, that's all I am. But I realized that if I was going to be doing this as a career and working with women who've been through some kind of a violent incident, I'm going to get some knowledge on counseling. And I then trained as a trauma counselor. Once I had done this training course, I decided, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? And I thought that the best thing to do would be to take this course to high schools, because I felt that teenage girls were the ones who were most vulnerable to rape, like all of you. And I embarked on a process, and this was back in 1986. Wow, some of you weren't even born. Most of you. All of you, now you're going, wow, this is a really old dude. So back then, I decided, okay, I'd start going to high schools and start speaking to girls and start training them on what I had developed. And it actually opened a can of worms. And why I say that is because every school I went to, and I did a training course, afterwards I found at least 10 or 15 young girls coming to me who had been raped. And the school was not aware of it. And the reason we realized that the school wasn't aware of it is because the girls didn't want to say anything to the school counselor, because often they didn't want their parents to find out about the rape. And this shocked me. And I started doing a lot of counseling of young ladies. And very often we were able to go and sit with her parents and say, this is what happened. Let's try and open a case. Let's try and get this guy locked up. And so it started a process where for 8 years, all I did on a daily basis was do what I'm doing now. Talk to young ladies, do training courses, do counseling for a long, long period throughout South Africa. The training course developed to the extent where it started being used at companies, and then worldwide I was being asked to come and do training. So the Washington University in Seattle have got a big problem with rape, and I had to go and train the young ladies there. And then in 2004, the training course won an international award in Canada. And so what I want to do in the next 45 minutes is to try and give you guys some insight into the knowledge that I've gained over the last 30 years. We're going to cram it into a bit of time. Right? Because our country has got a serious problem. Our biggest crime, or the biggest problem of all our crime, is rape. Last year, we had 54,000 women reporting a rape in this country. That's ridiculous. The thing that is really scary when I look at all the young ladies that I counsel who've been raped, only 1 in 16 of them are reporting the rape. So if we had to take that figure and we had to say of the 54,000 women who reported a rape last year, if that was only 1 in 16 people, then it means close on 1 million women get raped in this country every single year. And that is so scary. And my life's ambition has been to try and change that. And that is why I'm here today. So, one of the things that scared me when I started looking at rapes and the people who are doing it, because really the problem with rape in this country is not women, it's men, am I right? Yes. So in fact, I shouldn't be speaking to you. I should be at a boys' school speaking to them. I do that work as well. But today I'm here for you. Right, so the scary thing I found about most of the young ladies that I spoke to is that most of them actually knew the guy that raped them. In fact, in our country, 78% of all rapes, the woman actually knew the guy. And sometimes it's a very subtle thing. And sometimes he really doesn't even believe that he raped her. I'll give you an example of just one case. So, I was at a school like yours in Randburg, and I was chatting to a young girl after a session that we had, and she said, you know, she was at school now. This was a school that's got guys and girls, and they were having a sports day at the school, and she met this guy. Now she was in grade 10. Who's in grade 10? Okay, and he was in grade 12, and it was the first time that he really noticed her, and she kind of was. He was quite a hunk. And so the whole day at the sports day, they were walking around together, and he was buying her cold drinks and hot dogs and things. And eventually he said, listen, don't you want to come around to our house later for a bride? Because we're having a bride. And she said, well, I'll check with my mom. And her parents then phoned his parents and said, listen, is it okay? My daughter wants to come around to your place for a bride. And they said, yeah, fantastic. So around about 4 o'clock, she took her parents, went and dropped her off at his house. Soon after they dropped them, his mom and dad said, listen, we're going to quickly go to the shop to buy meat and stuff. We'll see you guys just now. So they sat and watched TV. And very soon started kissing. Which is quite expectable, maybe. So, while they're kissing, he starts touching her in areas that she doesn't want him to. And she kind of pushes his hands away. And he says to her, listen, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to. You know, you can trust me. And they carry on kissing, and again his hands start touching her all over, and she says when she tried to push his hands away now, he became more forceful. She says it was like his breathing had changed, and clearly he wasn't listening to her now, and she was trying to push him away. Eventually, he forced her down onto the carpet in the lounge, and because she was wearing a skirt, quite easy for him to penetrate. And she had started crying, and after he finished, he said, listen, don't worry, you know, you didn't enjoy it just because it was your first time, you'll enjoy it more the next time. That was his take on it. But is that rape? Yes. She didn't want it. She started crying. The fact that she didn't put up a big fight doesn't mean that it wasn't rape. And this is so often the case that I deal with. In fact, 99 out of 100 cases that I deal with, the woman never fights back. And the reason she doesn't fight back is because she's too scared of getting hurt. He's bigger than you, he's stronger than you. So often I've had women say to me, I just thought I'd just blank it out of my mind because I knew what was happening, and I just blank it out of my mind, let him just finish and leave. But that is what rape's about. Did he have a gun or a knife? No. So why not fight back? Now the reason very often we don't fight back is because you've never been taught to fight. How do I beat up a guy who's bigger and stronger than me? And this is a question I've been always asking, and the training course that I developed, and I'm going to tell you just now exactly how. It's actually very simple. Right, so one of the important things that I've realized is that you can prevent these kind of situations. And I look very often, I try and understand why a guy chooses a certain girl and takes advantage of it. And without a doubt, when I look at criminals, and I truly, after so many years, understand criminals very well, what they do is they look for someone who looks weak or vulnerable. Someone who they believe will not fight back. Right. So I quite often try and advise young ladies that you should try and get an attitude problem. So what do I mean by attitude problem? So let me give you an example. So let's presume you're at a party and there are some guys there, okay? And you're standing one side with your friends and you look across and the hottest guy that you know. Now you're all thinking, who is that? Who is that? You all know who's the hottest guy, hey, am I right? So the hottest guy you know, I'm not sure if he's at another school down the road or where, but he starts checking you out. And he eventually comes walking over to you. And he comes over and he says, hi. And you kind of like... maybe go to a movie sometime, and you kind of go, okay, this is cool. And then he kind of says, okay, so maybe we should do it this weekend. I'll get hold of you and we make plans. And you kind of, okay. And he walks off, and you go back to your friends. And they say, what was that all about? And he's like, yes, right. He said, he asked me to the movies. And what do they do?